Have you ever found yourself face to face with that green-eyed monster? The one that Shakespeare pointed out is jealousy or envy. You know what I'm talking about. You're looking across the room and you see that person who just seems to have it all together. Without an effort or a care in the world, they tend to be successful and they just ooze confidence, and it just seems to come so natural to them. And then you turn the focus on yourself and you think to yourself, I just don't have that kind of natural ability. I just can't be that good or that confident. What you're experiencing is not uncommon. But today we're going to talk about some different ways to identify what you're dealing with and change it. Welcome back to the Do More podcast. My name is Ben from benribble.com Coaching, where we focus on 3 foundational pillars in our coaching model, and that's leadership, productivity, and organization. Now, before we go any further in today's discussion, I want to remind you that I do have some spots available for a coaching discovery call, free discovery calls available. And all you have to do is jump over to laserfocused.life. That's laserfocused.life, L-I-F-E, to sign up for your free 30-minute discovery session in our Laser Focused Life coaching program. Now, let's jump back into today's topic. And really, we're going to name it right now. Today's topic is mindset. Psychologist Carol Dweck spent over 30 years of her career studying what she called growth mindset. In addition to that, she studied the opposite of that she called the fixed mindset. And she discusses in great detail her research and findings in her book called Mindset: The New Psychology of Success. Well, today we're going to discuss several facets of the mindset. And let's first by kind of jumping in and discussing what is the difference? What is fixed versus growth mindset? And really what it comes down to, fixed and growth mindset are 2 opposite ends of the spectrum, yet one person can have both a fixed and a growth mindset at the same time. I know, sounds confusing, right? But that actually can happen typically with different topics or different concepts in their life. So let's jump in to what is a fixed mindset. And basically what that is, that's when people believe that you're born with a certain mix of skills and or that you have a certain amount of time to develop those skills, and then once they have developed or you've passed that time, then you can no longer change the basic facts about yourself, right? No amount of work or effort can change the basic facts about a person. That's a fixed mindset. And oftentimes people with a fixed mindset will believe that success or failure is what defines them. And a lot of times they're reluctant to try new or challenging activities because of a fear of failure. And they also tend to believe that failure is final. And so that really has a stifling effect on these individuals. Oftentimes you'll find that people with a fixed mindset are not nearly as successful or can attain quite as much as a person who has the opposite, a growth mindset. So let's just kind of briefly talk about a growth mindset. And this is where we want people to get to is to where they have a growth mindset. And an individual who has a growth mindset might believe that your talents or intelligence, skills, abilities, etc., even down to character traits and interpersonal skills can be developed over time. You are not stuck the way you currently are, right? And in this mindset, challenges are embraced and setbacks, failure is viewed as an opportunity for learning and growth. And people with a growth mindset, again, they tend to embrace those challenges. They look for them. They try various different strategies to solve a problem. And they understand that mistakes are a part of learning and that mistakes and setbacks are obviously a learning opportunity, right? A stepping stone for growth. And in addition to that, you'll find that oftentimes someone with a growth mindset sees others' success as inspirational, whereas on the converse, someone with a fixed mindset is often going to find someone that is successful is threatening to them. Okay? So again, we have fixed mindset versus growth mindset, and we want to move more into a growth mindset. And one of the things that we can really jump into here in the psychology of this, or the science of it, is neuroplasticity. Now, I'm going to kind of give you a very, very high level overview here. This is not meant to be all the bits and pieces, the nitty gritty of the science. I am not a neurologist by any means, but I found this interesting myself, that we're going to talk about neuroplasticity, right? So the human brain has around 100 billion neurons, which are, the special kind of nerve cell in the brain, really. And these neurons connect to each other through connection points that we're going to call synapses, right? And they make around 100 trillion connections. All right. These numbers are numbers that we have a hard time comprehending with our own little brains. But 100 billion neurons make connections, and there are about 100 trillion of these connections that our brains make. And this vast network of neurons controls everything about our bodies, right? Think from our minds and our digestion and our breathing and our mental functions, memory, knowledge, thoughts, emotions. They control it all, right? And this network allows us to take in information, process it, remember it, and make new connections between things that we know, right? So for instance, let's say a connection of things that we know. Animals with big teeth can bite, right? We know that we learned that from a very young age. And then that's something that we've known, we've seen, we've grown accustomed to. And then we can make connections to those things. These connections, these neural connections, allow us to kind of elaborate on that as well. So let's say that now we encounter something for the first time. Let's say it's an animal that we've never seen before, but it has big teeth. And the connections allow us to recognize that if this animal that we've never seen before, don't have a name for, has big teeth, but we already know that animals with big teeth can bite, then we're going to make that connection that this animal can bite, and we're going to respond or react accordingly, right? Run. And so now, up until a few decades ago, scientists believed that the neurons in our brains grew rapidly only in childhood, and then they stopped growing as we reached maturity. And that's that fixed mindset, right? You only had a certain amount of time to grow or to change. And then they believed that the lack of new neural growth limited how much adults could learn and change later in life. And in essence, the scientific understanding, and this was widely accepted, was you can't teach an old dog new tricks. But we found that is just not true. Thankfully, that is not true. We can change at any point in our lives. And so these recent developments in neuroscience have completely changed this understanding, completely. With new tools that allow us to look inside the brain, like MRIs and such, scientists have discovered that neurons can grow and change throughout our lives. For example, after a stroke, humans can relearn skills like walking, speaking, fine hand movements, and so on. These are things that were neural connections that had been severed or broken, and they can be rebuilt, right? So even if the original part of the brain that controls the function that we're talking about here was damaged, it can be rebuilt. That's neuroplasticity, the ability of our brains to change and grow. Neuroplasticity. It's a beautiful thing, and it has a lot of impact on the way we look at the world around us, right? It gives us inspiration. So let's kind of talk about that for a few minutes here. Just, it's important now that we understand that growth mindset exists, that we find a way to implement that and develop that in our own lives. First, we have to recognize in ourselves, do I largely have a fixed mindset or a growth mindset? And remember, I said that people can have a little bit of both. Maybe in a situation where you're confident and you spend a lot of time, in this facet of your life. Let's say you're a musician. As a pianist, you know that you can develop your ability to play, and you practice more, and you practice more difficult and challenging pieces, or go back to the basics. You know that those things are going to have an impact on your ability to play, right? But let's say at the same time, you want to be a singer, but you've always told yourself, or maybe even been told, God forbid, that you are a horrible singer. And so you don't believe that you have the ability to get better as a vocalist, as a singer, right? That's an example of how we have one person who can actually harbor a fixed mindset and a growth mindset at the same time. And we're going to talk about, first of all, identifying places where you have that fixed mindset. And we're going to talk about how we can develop that into a growth mindset, and how we can take any part of your belief system and apply this growth mindset to it. So the first step is really understanding growth mindset. Understanding that you do have the ability to make new connections, make new neural connections, right? Learning about how the brain works and learning about how the brain grows. And even though it sounds and may seem extremely simple, Dweck's research here shows that simply becoming aware that growth is possible in any area helps people to shift to a growth mindset. So just hearing this podcast, recognizing the fact that there is such a thing as a growth mindset, can help you shift to a growth mindset. You are not stuck, my friend. You can grow. Now, there are all kinds of self-help books and all kinds of information out there on growth mindset, not just by Dweck, but by many other individuals. And I would encourage you to search some of those out, read some of those, whether they're a research paper or just a book that someone has written. It's worth it to kind of dig into growth mindset. And I find it to be very fascinating as well. The psychology of it all is really fascinating. And then the next step for you is have a plan for growth. Now that you've recognized that you can have a growth mindset, that you are not stuck, that you do have that neuroplasticity, now it's time for you to plan your growth, right? Do you have a specific set of actions or goals or habits that you wish to implement into your life? If not, this would be an excellent opportunity for you to sign up for the Laser Focused Life coaching discovery call, because that's really what we're going to do. We're going to identify some of those places where you wish to grow, and we're going to dig into those, and we're going to set up goals and habits and routines and things like that help you more automatically become the person that you want to be and grow, because we know you're capable of that via this growth mindset that we're discussing. So if you are interested, and there's no reason that you shouldn't be, jump over to laserfocused.life and sign up for that free discovery coaching session today. All right. And I would encourage you to do that as soon as possible, because the sooner that we can get started on this, here's the way I look at it. I, among other people, have often looked back at my life and said, I wish I had known this, XYZ concept or idea or whatever. I wish I had known this 20 years ago. Because if I'd known it 20 years ago, imagine where I could be today. Well, friend, I want to encourage you to think about, from 20 years from today, Are you going to be sitting somewhere saying, I wish I had known about this 20 years ago? Or are you going to get into it today? Jump into it today. Make the changes that need to be made today so that in 20 years you can instead look back on your life and say, wow, look at the growth that I've made in my life. Look at the changes. Look at the successes that I have found in my life in the last 20 years. Laserfocus.life, free 30-minute coaching discovery call. All right. And then the next thing you really are going to do after you've recognized that there is such a thing as a growth mindset, and then you've kind of made a plan. Now it's important, friends, to reflect on your growth. And we kind of just talked about that. In 20 years, look back and see what you've done. But don't just do that. Start today. Look back. What have you succeeded at? What have you achieved? Give yourself credit where credit is due, right? What did you learn? And how will you do things differently? A key component of growth is recognizing that we had some successes, and these are the tools and the methods that we use to find success, and then we implement those going forward. Or we find the things that didn't help us with our success, or in things that we did not grow in, and we exclude those from our toolbox going forward, right? We reflect on our growth, and we implement any changes that need to be made moving forward. Now, one of the things that is beautiful about a growth mindset, one of my favorite things, is that you have the ability to change. When you mess up, when you fail, when you struggle, you have the ability to recognize that as a learning opportunity, and you have the ability to change and move forward. Okay, so don't forget that. That is the one key takeaway. The big thing that I want you to take away from this discussion is that you have the ability to change and become a better you no matter when you start. If you start today, awesome. If you start tomorrow, awesome. If you started 3 years ago, awesome. Regardless, you have the ability to say today is a fresh new day, and I'm going to start over, and I'm going to make myself somebody to be proud of, right? So friends, the science is clear. It is possible to learn, grow, and change throughout your lifetime. No matter what you think your traits, abilities, or skills are, it's possible to improve in any area that you choose to focus on. However, in contrast, believing that your skills are fixed has a way of limiting what you can achieve. Don't fall into that trap. To truly unlock your potential, I want you to work on developing a growth mindset. And once you develop a love of learning and a belief in your own capacity for growth, then you can achieve anything you put your mind to. Let me say that again, friends. You can achieve anything that you set your mind to. All right, as we wrap up today's podcast, thank you again for hanging out with me to the very end of this podcast. Again, I'm going to invite you to jump over to laserfocused.life and set yourself up for success in the future by signing up for your free discovery coaching call with me as your coach. And we're going to identify some places that you can grow. And we're going to talk about different habits and routines that you can implement into your life that will help you get closer to your definition, whatever it is, of success. Now, I'm also going to invite you to jump over to podinbox.com/do-more so that you can leave me a voice comment, and have the opportunity to potentially be on a future episode of the Do More podcast. Now, friends, next time on the Do More podcast, we're going to talk about limiting beliefs. Limiting beliefs go hand in hand with what we're talking about here, the growth mindset. And it's going to be a real eye-opener for some of you. Some people even tend to get a little emotional when we're talking about limiting beliefs and how you can identify those and conquer them. So if you would, join me next time on the Do More podcast. As always, don't forget to make today a great day.